The year was 1934, and the small town of Milford had a way of turning its back on trouble. It was a place where gossip travelled faster than the train, and smiles at church could turn into cold shoulders on Monday. Eleanor Hayes had once been the brightest face at the Sunday market, her stall piled with garden roses that smelled like summer even in October. She'd wear a blue ribbon in her hair and laugh easily, the kind of laugh that made people pause and smile back. But when her husband died, that sound vanished from the town's air entirely. His death had been sudden, a sawmill accident, the kind that took a man in seconds and left the details to whispered speculation. They buried him on a day that felt too bright for mourning, sunlight falling across the wooden coffin like an insult. Eleanor wore black and stood straight, though she was shaking inside. The neighbors brought pies and flowers, and for a short time her porch was never empty. But grief has a way of exhausting sympathy, and as the weeks turned into months, the visits slowed, then stopped altogether. It was in the spring after his death that illness came. No one was sure what it was. Pneumonia, some said, a fever that settled into her bones, others claimed. Whatever it was, it left her paralyzed from the waist down, trapped in her own body. The farmhouse they had built together became her prison. The white paint peeled in strips, the roof sagged under years of weather, and the garden she once tended grew wild and choked with weeds. The sound of laughter, music, and neighbors' footsteps faded into memory. Her neighbors, once warm and eager to share news or trade vegetables, now crossed the street when they saw her at the window. "She's too much work," they'd mutter to one another, their voices low but sharp. Milford was not a place that welcomed burdens. It tolerated them in silence until they disappeared. Eleanor could feel herself disappearing too, piece by piece. The days became a blur of empty hours, her world shrinking to the few steps between her bed and the cold kitchen stove. Charity in Milford always came with conditions Eleanor could not meet. She could no longer host gatherings or keep her home in the order that the town considered respectable. She had no family left. Her parents had died years before, and there were no siblings or cousins close enough to send word. The little money her husband had saved had gone to medical bills and repairs she could no longer manage. Each creak of the farmhouse reminded her of something broken, something that needed fixing. By late autumn, her life had become a silent loop. Wake, move slowly to the kitchen, boil water for tea, and sit at the window watching frost crawl over the garden she once knew by heart. The roses had withered long ago, their bare stems bowing under the weight of ice. Hope, once a steady companion, now flickered like the last embers in a dying fire. She waited, though she didn't know for what. Perhaps for a letter, or for someone to remember she existed. Neither came. One morning, the frost clung thick to the grass, glittering like shards of broken glass in the pale light. The cold pressed against the farmhouse walls, seeping through every crack. Eleanor sat with her blanket pulled tight, her breath making small clouds in the air. She was thinking about making tea when she heard footsteps on the crooked path outside, a sound so rare that it made her heart leap. She turned toward the window just as a figure came into view. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, though his coat was patched and worn. His boots had seen better years, their leather cracked with use. He moved without hurry, each step steady, as though the cold didn't bother him. When he reached the porch, he paused and took off his cap, holding it in both hands, like a man about to step into a church. His hair was dark, streaked with early grey, and his face was weathered by work and wind. But it was his eyes Eleanor noticed first, steady, clear, and without a trace of pity. When she opened the door, he looked directly at her, not at the chair she sat in. "I hear you've got trouble with the house," he said. His voice was deep, even, carrying the kind of certainty that could quiet a restless room. Eleanor almost laughed. There was trouble with more than just the house. The whole of her life was trouble. yet something in his tone stopped her from saying so. It wasn't the voice of a man offering charity, it was the voice of a man arriving with purpose. She let him in, unsure why she was trusting him. Perhaps it was the steadiness in his gaze, or the way he didn't fidget or look around nervously, as others did when faced with her condition. He stepped into the kitchen and looked around, not with pity, but with a builder's eye. He noticed the sagging doorway, the too narrow hallway, the uneven floors. His gaze moved like a craftsman's hands, seeing not just the flaws, but the ways they could be mended. He didn't fill the silence with small talk. Instead, he asked short, practical questions. Where do you spend most of your time? What's hard to reach? Where do you feel stuck? Eleanor answered slowly, unused to anyone asking in such a way that suggested they intended to act. He took a battered wooden ruler from his coat and began measuring. The pencil in his hand scratched across a small notebook, filling it with quick, precise marks. "You'll need a ramp out front," he murmured. "Rails in the hallway, pantry shelves lowered, maybe widen the bedroom door." She sat there, stunned. No one had ever walked into her home with the intention of making it better, only with the intent to make her feel small or to remind her of what she had lost. But this man, whoever he was, spoke as though the problems were simply wood and nails, things that could be fixed with the right tools and enough time. It was almost disorienting. The way he took her limitations as facts, not fair solve. When he closed his notebook, he didn't make any grand promises. He didn't say it would be easy, or that everything would be fine. He only set the pencil behind his ear and said, "I'll be back tomorrow." Then he tipped his cap, turned, and walked back down the crooked path. Eleanor sat there for a long time after the door closed, staring at the frost-silvered yard. She could still hear his boots on the path in her mind, each step carrying an unspoken assurance. As she wheeled herself back toward the window, a strange warmth spread in her chest. It wasn't the heat from the stove, it was something deeper. She tried to remember the last time she had felt it and realized it had been before the accident, before the illness, before she had stopped expecting people to care. For the first time in many months, hope had returned, and it had come knocking, wearing a carpenter's coat, carrying nothing more than a ruler, a pencil, and quiet resolve. Day by day, Thomas worked with a patience Eleanor had never seen before. Each morning he arrived just after the first hint of light, his breath turning to mist in the cool air, tools slung over his shoulder. The frost still clung to the edges of the porch when his boots touched it, and the first sound of his hammer echoed like a heartbeat in the quiet. The scent of fresh-cut pine soon filled the air, mixing with the aroma of the tea Eleanor sipped from her chipped mug. Outside her window, the rhythm of rebuilding replaced the stillness that once suffocated her. He started with the front porch, replacing rotten boards one by one, his hands moving with the precision of a man who understood wood like an old friend. The warped steps, too narrow for her chair, were torn away and replaced with a gentle, sturdy ramp that rose like a promise toward the door. Eleanor watched him work from the kitchen, sunlight catching in his hair as he measured twice, cut once, and drove each nail with care. It was as though every strike was securing not just wood, but a piece of her fractured life. Though her body failed her legs, her spirit leaned toward the window every morning. She wanted to help, but her hands, trembling from weakness, could only grip her mug and offer small suggestions. Still, Thomas seemed to work, as though her words were as important as his blueprints. When she teased that his ramp looked fit for a queen, he only smiled faintly and muttered, "Then it's fit for you." That small kindness wrapped around her tighter than the wool shawl on her shoulders. Inside the farmhouse, change came in quiet waves. He replaced sagging pantry shelves, lowering them so she could reach without stretching until her shoulders burned. Door frames that had caught her wheels for months were sanded smooth, the wood polished with linseed oil until it shone. Along the hallway, he fixed handrails, each rounded and shaped to match the curl of her fingers. No jagged splinters, no harsh edges, just the solid promise of something made for her and her alone. She learned that Thomas spoke little when he worked, but in the evenings, words flowed like slow rivers. Over bowls of thick stew or bread, still warm from Eleanor's oven, she told him of summer picnics in the meadow with her late husband, of the roses she once sold at the Sunday market, and of the long nights when she'd hear the wind whistle through the broken roof. Thomas listened with a stillness that made her feel her words mattered more than the repairs themselves. When he spoke, it was of years spent wandering, town to town, barn to barn, never staying long enough to plant roots. "A man who keeps moving," he said once, "doesn't have to watch things fall apart." But there was no bitterness in his voice, only a quiet resignation. Eleanor understood. Loneliness, she thought, had a way of shaping people without them knowing it, carving lines into their hearts the way rivers carved valleys into stone. They did not speak of pity. It hung unspoken between them, replaced by mutual respect. One morning, Thomas arrived with something different in his hands. Oak planks, sanded smooth and polished until they caught the morning light. He carried them into the barn, where the air soon filled with the sound of his saw and the smell of cut wood. Eleanor didn't ask what he was building. Instead, she listened to the rasp of the plane, the steady knock of his mallet. Those sounds, once ordinary, now felt like music, notes of a song that promised change was coming. For hours each day, he worked on that secret project, shaping, joining, and oiling each piece as if it were meant for royalty. Sometimes she would hear him humming low under his breath, a tune unfamiliar but comforting. When he came in for lunch, sawdust clung to his coat, his hair, even his eyelashes. She found herself smiling more in those moments, the farmhouse slowly filling with something she had thought was gone forever: life. By the end of the week, she understood what he had been making. He wheeled it into the kitchen, a hand-carved wheelchair, sturdy yet graceful, each joint fitted perfectly. The armrests curved gently under her hands. The seat was smooth, and in the back he had carved a rose in full bloom, its petals opening to the natural grain of the oak. Her breath caught as she traced the carving with trembling fingers, the wood warm from his touch. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Thomas's answer was simple. "It's yours." She felt a lump in her throat, the kind that made words impossible. For years, every chair had felt like a prison. This one felt like a key. Thomas adjusted the wheels, checking every bolt before stepping back. His eyes, usually so calm, carried a spark of satisfaction. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt like a person again. "Thank you," she managed, though the words felt far too small for the gift in front of her. The following morning, Thomas announced they were going outside. Eleanor hesitated. She hadn't left the porch in over a year. But his insistence was gentle, almost playful, and soon she found herself rolling down the ramp he had built, the new chair gliding smoothly under his steady guidance. The crisp autumn wind met her face, carrying the earthy scent of fallen leaves and distant chimney smoke. Her hair lifted slightly in the breeze, and the pale sunlight touched her skin like a blessing. They crossed the yard into the open field beyond. Gold and rust-colored stalks swayed in the wind, and somewhere in the distance a flock of crows rose into the sky, their wings dark against the pale horizon. Eleanor's hands gripped the armrests, not from fear, but from the shock of freedom. Every bump in the earth, every turn of the wheels reminded her she was moving, really moving, through the world again. She closed her eyes, letting the sounds and scents wash over her. When she opened them, she saw her land as if for the first time. The old oak tree near the fence line still stood strong, its branches swaying in the breeze. The hills rolled away in shades of amber and brown, and in the distance the river glimmered under the low sun. "I'd forgotten," she whispered, voice thick, "how wide the sky feels out here." Thomas stood behind her, silent, letting her have the moment. Sometimes silence spoke more than words ever could. Tears filled her eyes, blurring the horizon. "You've given me back my life," she said softly, not turning to see his face. She felt his hands rest lightly on the back of the chair, steady and warm. "No, ma'am," he said, his voice carrying the same quiet certainty as every nail he'd driven. "Just the freedom you should have never lost." The words sank into her heart like the final perfect piece of wood in a long-built frame. The wind carried his voice away, but its weight stayed with her. Somewhere between the first board replaced and this golden afternoon, Thomas had built more than ramps and shelves. He had built a bridge back to the life she thought was gone forever. And in that quiet field, Eleanor Hayes knew she would never again be truly alone. For some gifts could not be repaid in coin or favor. They could only be carried forward, like light in the dark, to warm another soul someday.